Welcome to The Guided Flame. If you want our hard work to bring you more amazing videos, then like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your likes and comments mean a lot to us. Today, we will hear a truly remarkable story, one that will leave you astonished. This is the story of a 6-year-old Muslim boy who, despite his innocence and naivety, possesses a sharp intellect that leads to an unexpected debate with a 57-year-old atheist professor at a prestigious university in Switzerland. At the heart of this story is Dr. Helena Krauss, a philosophy professor known for her strong logical reasoning and relentless criticism of religion, especially Islam. To her, religion is nothing more than a myth that hinders scientific progress and restricts free thought. On the other hand, we have Omar Hassan, a bright and innocent 6-year-old Muslim boy with unwavering faith. His father is a visiting lecturer from the Middle East, conducting research at the university, while his mother is a devout Muslim who instills in him the values and importance of Islam in daily life. This story begins in one of the university's lecture halls, where Dr. Helena is delivering a lecture on myths and realities in civilization, a course she often uses as a platform to criticize religion, particularly Islam. Religion is nothing more than a cultural construct, Dr. Helena declares confidently before her students. There is nothing truly scientific in religious scriptures. They are merely old fairy tales passed down from generation to generation. And look at Islam, with all its rigid rules about hijab and prayer 5 times a day. Doesn't it restrict individual freedom? The room falls silent. Some students nod in agreement, while others hesitate, unsure of how to respond. Not far from the lecture hall, Omar sits quietly, waiting for his father to finish his class. By chance, he overhears Dr. Helena's remarks. Though small in stature, his curious eyes hold deep questions. During the question and answer session, a female student raises her hand hesitantly. "Professor, do you believe that all religions are wrong, even Islam?" Dr. Helena smirks. "Of course. Islam, with all its strict Sharia laws, represents one of the highest forms of oppression. Take the hijab, for example. Why should a woman be required to cover herself? Why not allow her the freedom to choose? This is not the Middle Ages." A heavy silence fills the room. No one dares to challenge her statement, until a small yet firm voice emerges from the back. "But Professor, doesn't freedom also mean not forcing someone to remove their hijab?" All eyes turn toward the source of the voice. Omar stands up, his small frame exuding confidence. Dr. Helena frowns, taken aback by the unexpected interruption. "Who are you, kid?" she asks, trying to maintain her authority. "My name is Omar," he replies politely. "I was waiting for my father to finish his class, but I overheard the professor speaking about hijab and Islam. So, I have a question." The students exchange glances, whispering in surprise. A little boy challenging an atheist professor? This was unheard of. Dr. Helena gives a condescending smile. "All right, Omar, what do you want to ask?" Omar remains calm. "Professor, you said the hijab is oppressive. But if a woman chooses to wear the hijab of her own free will, is it still considered oppression?" The room goes silent. Dr. Helena pauses for a few seconds before forcing a smile. "A child like you may not fully understand," she says with a small laugh. "Many women who wear the hijab don't actually choose it. They are pressured by their families, their culture, or society." Omar nods but doesn't back down. "So, if a woman doesn't want to remove her hijab but is forced to do so, isn't that also oppression?" Dr. Helena hesitates. This simple yet logical question presents a dilemma that is difficult to refute. A male student in the front row raises his hand. "Professor, wouldn't that also be a form of coercion? If a woman wants to wear the hijab, shouldn't it be her choice?" The classroom suddenly becomes lively with murmurs. Dr. Helena, who had always dominated discussions with ease, now found herself struggling to regain control. She had not expected a child to challenge her arguments in such a profound way. Omar continued, his voice filled with innocent conviction. I've heard that true freedom means being able to choose without force or pressure. If a woman wants to wear the hijab for the sake of Allah, why should anyone forbid her? The room erupted in discussion. Students began exchanging opinions among themselves, while Dr. Helena remained silent, sensing that the debate was shifting in an unexpected direction. And this was just the beginning of a debate that would change everything. The lecture hall was no longer the same. What had once been dominated by Dr. Helena's voice had now transformed into a heated discussion arena. Some students seemed intrigued by Omar's simple yet logical questions. Determined to regain control, Dr. Helena folded her arms and looked at Omar with a measured expression. You are still too young to understand the concept of freedom, Omar. The world is not as simple as you imagine. Islam imposes restrictions on women, and the hijab is a symbol of that limitation. If a woman is taught from childhood that covering her body is an obligation, is that truly a choice? Or is it a form of indoctrination that forces them to accept without question? She challenged. Omar furrowed his brows, deep in thought. Despite his young age, his words carried a maturity that stunned the room. So, Professor, are you saying that anyone who is taught something from childhood is being forced into it? He asked. Then does that mean someone who is taught from childhood that religion does not exist is also being forced not to believe? A wave of realization swept through the room. Omar's question was simple yet profound. Some students exchanged glances, clearly impressed by his reasoning. Dr. Helena was momentarily silent, unaccustomed to being challenged in this way, especially not by a 6-year-old. She took a deep breath and responded in a firm tone. That is different. A child who is taught to think scientifically and logically from a young age is given the ability to question everything and arrive at their own conclusions. Omar smiled slightly and glanced at the students, many of whom now appeared deep in thought. But isn't that still a form of coercion, Professor? He asked. If a child is raised believing there is no God, that religion is just a myth and is never given the opportunity to study Islam or any other faith, isn't that also a restriction? The room fell into silence once again. The whispers among students grew louder as they reflected on the question. A male student in the front row, wearing glasses, finally spoke up. Professor, I think Omar has made an interesting point. We always discuss freedom, but do we truly grant it to everyone? Aren't we perhaps unknowingly imposing a particular perspective on others? Dr. Helena sensed the discussion slipping out of her control. She had not anticipated this turn of events. We are not discussing atheism or other religions here, she interjected quickly. Our focus is on Islam and how it restricts women's rights. Omar raised his small hand again, his voice steady. Then I have another question, Professor. Have you ever asked Muslim women who choose to wear the hijab whether they feel oppressed? Dr. Helena arched an eyebrow. Of course, many of them feel burdened but are afraid to remove it due to family and societal pressure. Omar nodded thoughtfully. So, the professor has only spoken to those who feel oppressed, he said. What about the women who wear the hijab because they love Allah, because they feel more comfortable and protected? If the professor has never asked them, how can you be certain that the hijab is always a form of oppression? A sudden movement drew attention to a student who had been silent until now. She wore a hijab and looked determined as she raised her hand to speak. I am a Muslim, and I wear the hijab not because I was forced to, Professor, she said confidently. I chose this because I feel it is part of my identity. In fact, with the hijab, I feel respected because people don't judge me solely by my appearance, but by my thoughts and personality. Dr. Helena regarded the student with mild surprise, clearly not expecting this shift in the discussion. However, she pressed on. But have you ever felt that without the hijab you would be freer? She asked. The student offered a small smile. Free in what sense, Professor? if freedom means... The classroom had turned into a heated debate arena, something Dr. Helena had never expected. Some students sided with Omar and the hijabi student, while others still supported the professor. Omar spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "Professor, you said that freedom means being able to choose for ourselves without pressure from anyone. Then why is it that when a woman chooses to wear the hijab, society, which claims to be free, often forces her to take it off?" Dr. Helena let out a deep sigh. The argument she had firmly believed in now seemed to have a loophole. A male student raised his hand and spoke up. "Professor, if we're really talking about freedom, shouldn't we let people choose for themselves? If a woman wants to wear the hijab, let her. If she doesn't, that's her right. But we shouldn't assume that the hijab always means oppression." Dr. Helena felt like she was losing control of the discussion. She hadn't anticipated that this debate would turn against her so quickly.
Just then, the bell rang, signaling the end of the lecture. Students began gathering their belongings, but the discussion was far from over. Many of them continued talking amongst themselves, deeply engaged in the argument that had just unfolded. Dr. Helena turned her gaze toward Omar, who was still standing in place, his expression calm and unshaken. There was something remarkable about this boy. He wasn't just any child. His way of thinking was sharper than many university students she had taught. "Omar," she called, her voice softer now. "I want to talk to you further later. I want to understand how you see the world." Omar smiled. "I would love to, Professor. I also want to know how you see the world." And with that, the debate was just beginning. As the lecture hall emptied, students continued discussing the debate with excitement. Omar's name began to echo among them, the 6-year-old boy who had innocently challenged an experienced professor. Meanwhile, Dr. Helena remained seated at her desk, deep in thought. She had faced many debates before, but this was different. She could easily counter arguments from her students. But Omar? This boy was an anomaly in her system. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "Omar, come with me to my office." Omar turned to his mother, who had been waiting near the classroom door. She nodded, signaling that it was okay for her son to follow the professor. They walked through the quiet university hallways. A few students watched them curiously. Whispers spread about how a small child had managed to challenge an atheist professor with such confidence. When they arrived at Dr. Helena's office, she opened the door and gestured for Omar to enter. The office was spacious, lined with tall bookshelves filled with academic literature and adorned with several awards and certificates. Omar looked around, fascinated, but remained silent, waiting for the professor to speak first. Dr. Helena sat in her chair, folding her arms across her chest. She studied Omar carefully before speaking. "I want to know something, Omar," she said, her tone now calmer than before. "Where did you learn all of this? Who taught you to think this way?" Omar smiled slightly. "Islam taught me to think, Professor. My father always says that Islam isn't just about rituals. It's about understanding life with both the mind and the heart. The Quran is a book full of knowledge. I just read and reflect on it." Dr. Helena was taken aback. This was not the answer she had expected. She had assumed Omar had been strictly trained by a religious teacher or raised in a rigid, conservative environment. But no, this child spoke as if his understanding came from deep personal reflection. "But how can a child understand such complex ideas?" she asked, skepticism evident in her voice. Omar's expression remained unchanged. "I am nothing special, Professor. I just ask questions and seek answers, like you. I try to understand the world, only from a different perspective." Dr. Helena was silent, staring at the young boy sitting before her. For the first time in a long while, she found herself at a loss for words. Helena felt something shift within her. It wasn't easy to accept this perspective. There was resistance within her. "Omar, have you never doubted your religion?" she asked. "No," Omar replied without hesitation. Have you ever considered that maybe everything you've learned was just dogma instilled in you since childhood? Omar nodded once. Professor, I once asked myself, how do I know Islam is true? How do I know Allah exists? Helena was surprised. She hadn't expected him to admit it so honestly. And how did you find your answer? She asked. Omar smiled. I read the Quran. I saw how its contents aligned with science, how it spoke about the stars, the depths of the ocean, and things that modern science has only recently discovered. I also looked at life itself. If there were no God, then why is there order in everything? Why does the human heart feel things that science cannot explain? Helena fell silent, his words leaving her deep in thought. All her life, she had been taught to think critically, to question everything, and to reject anything that couldn't be scientifically proven. But now, she realized, even in science there were questions without answers. But there's so much violence and injustice in the world, she finally said. Omar nodded. That's true, Professor. But is it the fault of religion or the fault of the people who misuse it? Many crimes have been committed in the name of science. Does that mean science is wrong? Helena stared at Omar. This child wasn't speaking from emotion alone. He was using sharp logic. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted them. A male lecturer entered with a puzzled expression. Helena, I heard something unusual. Is it true that a child debated with you in class? He asked with an amused smile. Helena glanced at Omar before turning back to her colleague. Not just a child, she said softly. He's more than that. Omar simply smiled. The debate was far from over. Dr. Helena kept staring at Omar, her expression unreadable. She had heard arguments from philosophers, scientists, and academics all her life, but what this 6-year-old boy had just said had truly shaken her. Her colleague, Dr. Marcus, leaned against the doorway, smirking. So, Hel, you've been debating a kid, and now you look like you're deep in thought, he teased. Helena took a deep breath. It wasn't just a debate. I just met someone who shouldn't have this level of understanding at his age. Marcus chuckled. You're joking. What could a child possibly know that we don't? Omar turned to Marcus and smiled. Can I ask you something, Professor? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh, sure. I like questions. Omar studied him curiously. Professor, do you believe in science? Of course. Science is the foundation of all human knowledge. Omar nodded. Okay. Do you also believe that the universe operates under fixed laws? Yes, everything follows laws and principles. Then doesn't that mean there must be someone who established those laws? For a moment, Marcus hesitated. Ah, I see where you're going with this. You're suggesting that these natural laws prove the existence of God, he said, crossing his arms. But these laws just exist. They function on their own through a long process. Omar's smile didn't fade. But how can you be sure that these laws just exist? Where did they come from? Why are they stable and not chaotic? Marcus was caught off guard. He hadn't expected the boy to push him this far. He glanced at Helena, who was now watching the conversation with great interest. Well, Marcus began, the laws of nature function the way they do. We don't need a creator to explain something that works naturally. So, you believe that something can exist without a cause? Omar asked innocently. Marcus hesitated. Helena, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke. Omar, science tries to understand the world through testable and observable methods, but belief in God, it can't be tested that way. Omar met her gaze, calm and unwavering. Professor, there are many things in life that cannot be tested scientifically but are still real, like love, for example. Helena and Marcus exchanged glances. Yes, of course, Helena finally answered. But can you prove love through a laboratory experiment? Omar asked. Marcus chuckled. Omar, love is an emotion, not a law of nature. Omar nodded. Exactly. But Professor, you still believe in love, don't you? Even though it cannot be measured like gravity? Helena sighed. What are you trying to say, Omar? The boy smiled softly. That there are things beyond what we can see or measure with science. Science can explain how things work, but it cannot always explain why they exist. The room fell silent. Marcus seemed deep in thought. He was used to heated debates with professors and students, yet, for the first time, he felt like a student being taught by a teacher, and that feeling unsettled him. Helena leaned back in her chair, studying Omar with curiosity. Omar, what if I still don't believe? What if your arguments still don't convince me? Omar didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her with warmth in his eyes. Professor, you don't have to believe right away. What matters is that you are willing to think and search for the answer yourself. God does not force belief on anyone. He gives signs for those who truly wish to see. Helena felt a strange turmoil within her, a restlessness she had long ignored. Marcus, who was usually so confident, now sat in silence, staring at the boy with a complicated expression. Just then, the bell rang, signaling the start of the next class. Helena glanced at the clock before turning back to Omar. She hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Omar, I don't know what to say, but I will think about everything you said. Omar smiled. Thank you, Professor. That's more than enough. But this debate isn't over. This is only the beginning of something bigger. Helena sat alone in her office after the discussion with Omar. She stared blankly at her laptop screen, but her mind was still caught in the whirlwind of their debate. She had always placed her faith in science. To her, everything had to be explained through logic, experiments, and tangible proof. But Omar's words had left a deep impression. Science can explain how things work, but not always why they exist. She rubbed her face, trying to shake the unease building inside her. She had never felt this kind of restlessness before. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she said softly. Dr. Marcus stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His usual confident expression was replaced by something more serious. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Helena sighed. "I don't know, Marcus. That boy, Omar, he's made me question a lot of things." Marcus sat down in the chair across from her, folding his hands. "I can't stop thinking about it either. After that conversation, I spent hours rereading arguments on atheism and theism, but somehow none of them could fully dismiss the questions Omar raised." Helena looked at him in surprise. "You too?" Marcus nodded. "I'm not someone who is easily swayed, especially not by a child. But this was different. He didn't just speak with conviction. He spoke with a depth of understanding that I wouldn't expect from someone his age." Helena exhaled deeply. "So, what do we do now, Marcus?" A small smile tugged at Marcus's lips. "I think we need to find answers. We spent our lives believing we already know everything. Maybe it's time we open ourselves to the possibility that we don't." Helena fell silent. She couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling in her heart, the one that had been growing since she met Omar. That night, Helena couldn't sleep. Frustrated, she got out of bed, grabbed her laptop, and started researching Islam. For years, she had only known about Islam through media portrayals and academic books, but this time, she chose to read with a different mindset, with an open heart. And what she found surprised her. She read about how Islam emphasizes a balance between science and spirituality, how the Quran contains verses that describe scientific phenomena, things that were discovered only centuries later. The more she read, the more intrigued she became. This wasn't just a religion based on blind faith, it was something deeper, something rational. And for the first time in her life, Helena felt as though she was standing at the edge of a truth she had never considered before. But there was one verse that truly shook her heart. Do they not look at the camels, how they were created, and at the sky, how it was raised, and at the mountains, how they were firmly set, and at the earth, how it was spread out? Quran, Surah Al-Ghashiyah, 17-20. Helena read the verse over and over again. There was something profound in those words, something that resonated deep within her. She closed her laptop and gazed out the window. For the first time in her life, she felt small in the presence of something far greater than herself. The next day, Helena decided to meet Omar and his mother at a small cafe near the campus. As soon as Omar saw her, he smiled warmly. Professor Helena. Helena offered a small smile in return. May I sit with you? Omar's mother nodded politely. Of course, Professor. Is there something we can help you with? Helena looked at Omar intently. Omar, I have one last question. Omar nodded. Of course, Professor. Helena took a deep breath. How can I be sure that Allah truly exists? Omar smiled gently. Professor, sometimes we don't need to see something directly to know that it exists. You can't see the wind, but you can feel its breeze. You can't see gravity, but you can feel its pull. Helena remained silent, absorbing his words. Omar continued. The same is true for God. We may not see him directly, but we can feel his presence in every event, in every small miracle that happens around us. And if you truly wish to feel it, try praying. Ask with a sincere heart. Helena felt something tighten in her chest. She looked down at her trembling hands. For the first time in her life, she felt the urge to pray, and in that moment, tears fell from her eyes. A few months later, Helena stood in front of a mirror, staring at her reflection. She adjusted the hijab on her head. It was the first time she had ever worn one. Behind her, Marcus stood in silent awe. You really did it, he murmured. Helena smiled. Yes, Marcus. I finally found the peace I had been searching for all this time. Marcus sighed. I'm still searching too. But seeing you today, I think maybe it's time I open myself up more. Helena placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Faith is a personal journey, Marcus. But if you seek with sincerity, I'm certain you'll find the answer. Marcus smiled faintly. Omar is truly an extraordinary child. Helena nodded. Yes, and I'm grateful to have met him. This story teaches us that sometimes light comes from the most unexpected places. That knowledge and faith are not in conflict. They can walk hand in hand, and that sometimes a single child can bring about a profound change in someone's life. See you in the next inspiring story.